Have a chat to Peter Jennings from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, worked with the Department of Defence for some time. Now, let's talk about the Port of Darwin. If we decided to rip up that deal, presumably compensation needs to be paid. Is it true that that could end up being $500 million worth of compensation going back to the Chinese?
I'm not too sure. I mean, the original lease for 99 years was just a shade over 500 million, Paul. So I guess if there is going to be a payout, that might be the start of a negotiating point. It also comes down to, well, what is the fair market value of the port? And it was claimed at the time that, in fact, the Chinese company significantly overbid the real value of the port in order to secure access to it. So I don't know. I think this is something that's just going to have to come out in coming days and weeks.
So my guess is there'll be a big chunk of people who are willing to pay no matter what it happens to be. What's your position? Because again, if the federal government makes a decision to tear this up, presumably there's a compensation part of this that kicks in. So do you think that there is, I mean, I'm not asking you to name the number here, but Australians should understand that if that agreement ends early, a significant amount of compensation needs to be paid, right?
Some compensation may be paid. I think it depends on how the federal government chooses to do it. Right. The port is not going to be shut down. I imagine what would happen would be that the government would then put it back onto the market to see if it could be sold into Australian hands or sold into international hands on the part of countries that we could trust. And that sale would then yield money back to the Commonwealth government for taking it over. So I don't think this needs to blast a hole in the Australian budget for any length of time. The key issue that our government needs to consider is whether or not they're satisfied that it is a sensible thing from a national security point of view to allow Australia's only strategic port, effectively between Perth and Townsville, to be under the control of a Chinese company for 94 more years.
Yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I think we've got to get out of it. We should have never got into it. I think we should get out of it, no question. But I want to ask you this. I understand, and I am totally on board for all of the calling out of China's extremes and all the rest. But something has changed in the past 2 weeks that I don't like, which is Pizzullo and others talking about, hey, get ready for the hot war. I don't think we need to go that far. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think we do need to be careful with the language we use. The drums of war, for example, I thought was a step too far. But it's important also not to follow, Mark Latham's suggestion, which is we just don't talk about the war. Let's be clear about this. Australia is talking no one into a war. No one here is interested in doing it. But it's not Australia which is responsible for fortifying those islands in the South China Sea to turn them into military bases. It's not Australia that's launching attacks across the line of control to kill Indian soldiers on the India-China border, or flying aggressively into Taiwanese airspace, or flying aggressively into Japanese airspace. And at some stage, the Australian government needs to be direct enough with the Australian people, Paul, I would argue, to say that we have to let them know what's going on. If we take the approach of saying, let's not talk about the war, that is not going to stop China from attempting to do what it's doing, which is to grow its own military control over this part of the world. So there's a balance to be struck between sugarcoating everything and looking the other way and pretending that nothing's going on. That's not true. China is becoming an aggressive problem, which I think every country in the Indo-Pacific recognises, and then going too far, which maybe the drums of war statement was an example of that.
Peter, well, the TV part of me says let you and Mark Latham go at it, but I will leave it there. Thank you so much, Peter. I do appreciate it. Peter there from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Sorry, boss, I know the better TV would be the fight, but that wasn't a planned one, so not fair to either to do so.